In the West, quinoa became a symbol of purity, a miracle grain. Gluten-free, protein-rich, and ethically divine, a superfood that promised to heal both our bodies and the planet. But what if I told you that this clean, green dream hides one of the dirtiest truths in the wellness industry? Because behind every $15 quinoa bowl in Los Angeles, there's a farmer in the Andes who can no longer afford to eat the food he grows. Once a sacred crop of the Quechua and Aymara peoples, the mother grain offered to Pachamama, quinoa was meant to nourish those who tended the earth. But when it reached Western shelves, something changed. What was sacred became a commodity, and the communities that protected it for thousands of years were left to starve in the name of our health. This is not just the story of a grain. It's the story of how good intentions and global markets turn nourishment into exploitation. Before the conquest, quinoa was more than food. It was breath, ritual, resistance disguised as nourishment. Every seed was offered to Pachamama with a whisper of gratitude. The farmers didn't own the land, they belonged to it. Children learned to plant with their bare hands, to feel when the soil was ready and when the mountain spirits were angry. The valleys shimmered with red and golden fields. Each harvest was a ceremony, a chorus of songs that climbed the thin air of the Andes. Then came the hooves, the sound of empire-crushing stone. The Spaniards came searching for gold, but found faith instead, a faith rooted in the earth, and they feared it. They saw in quinoa a threat, a food that sustained rebellion, a ritual that belonged to gods older than theirs. So they banned it, burned it, tore the fields apart, and forced the farmers to kneel before wheat and barley, the seeds of Europe planted in foreign soil. Those who refused fled to the high plains, where the cold winds cut the skin and the soil turned to dust. There, in silence, they kept planting. By night, they sowed quinoa under starlight, hiding it from the eyes of the priest. They whispered the old prayers in secret and carried the grain in cloth pouches against their chests, as if it were the last ember of a dying world. For centuries, the empire changed faces, but not hunger. Quinoa remained the food of the poor, the exiled, those who had their land and their dreams stolen, those who fed others but starved themselves. Yet the grain endured. Through wars, droughts, dictatorships, and markets collapsing like dry soil, it clung to life in the hands of Andean women, keepers of seeds who refused to forget. And then, 500 years later, the world came looking for salvation again. Not the conquistadors this time, but scientists, nutritionists, and investors, the new missionaries of modern wellness.
3, 2, 1, 0, and liftoff of Space Shuttle Endeavour, expanding the International Space Station while creating a classroom in space.
In the 1970s, researchers from NASA began studying quinoa. They were searching for a perfect crop to feed astronauts on long-term space missions, a plant resilient to extreme conditions, rich in all 9 essential amino acids, capable of surviving where others die. The scientists were astonished. Quinoa wasn't just a grain, it was a biological miracle. By the early 1980s, nutrition journals in the US and Europe began calling it the perfect protein. Health magazines hailed it as the Inca's gift to the world. Suddenly, the forgotten grain of the Andes was reborn, but this time in glossy photos and wellness manifestos. The Western world, weary of processed food and factory farms, was desperate for purity. Quinoa became its holy symbol: vegan, gluten-free, organic, ancient, sustainable. Every word a prayer to our own health, every purchase a modern indulgence disguised as virtue. And at first, it seemed like justice had finally arrived. The farmers of Bolivia and Peru watched the prices soar. For the first time in generations, their work was worth something. They bought motorcycles, repaired their homes, sent their children to school. But the world never just remembers, it consumes.
El trabajo de la cosecha de la quinoa es cansado, sí, es cansado el precio, y era muy barato. La gente no quería quinoa. Los abuelos, bisabuelos siempre nos han enseñado a que este alimento deben comerlo primero, ¿no? Porque es lo que les va a ayudar más adelante para que cuando seamos abuelos pues no estemos también enfermándonos de la salud, de todas esas cosas, ¿no?
Workers gather early in the morning and they pass around handfuls of coca leaves. Then they call to Pachamama, or Mother Earth, to help them get the job done quickly.
It began like a miracle. By the early 2000s, quinoa had become the darling of the wellness world, the crown jewel of the global health revolution. From London to Los Angeles, it appeared in cookbooks, cafes, and celebrity diets. The same grain that once grew in silence at 4,000 meters above sea level was now sold as liquid gold for the conscience. Between 2006 and 2013, its price tripled. Exports from Bolivia and Peru exploded. Farmers who once carried sacks of grain on muleback suddenly watched trucks from multinational traders lining up at their gates. Money was pouring into the Altiplano, but so was something else: pressure. Communal lands that had always been shared began to fracture. Families divided their ancestral soil to plant more. Every corner of the plateau turned into a battlefield of seeds and ambition. Quinoa, the mother grain, was now a commodity. The language of the market replaced the language of ritual. Where people once offered the first harvest to Pachamama, they now offered it to exporters. The songs of gratitude gave way to the hum of generators and the roar of bulldozers clearing wild land for planting. The demand from abroad was insatiable. Buyers in New York, Paris, and Tokyo didn't see the dry winds that cracked the soil. They only saw organic printed in gold letters. They didn't hear the farmers argue about access to water or how herds of llamas, sacred animals that once fertilized the fields, were being sold off to make more room for quinoa. Some cooperatives tried to hold on to their traditions, creating fair trade networks and limiting exports. But as new middlemen appeared, chasing quick profit, the balance collapsed. Prices rose so high that local families could no longer afford their own harvest. The grain that had sustained their ancestors was now beyond their reach. They began eating rice and pasta imported from Chile, cheap, empty calories that filled the stomach but not the spirit. Malnutrition increased in the very regions that produced the healthiest food on Earth. The world called it progress. In the Andes, it felt like déjà vu. A new conquest, not with swords, but with contracts and barcodes. Governments celebrated export records. NGOs praised the success story of the superfood. But beneath the headlines, the land was exhausted. Monoculture stripped away diversity. The thin topsoil, centuries in the making, blew away with the wind. And when the international market finally cooled, as trends always do, many communities were left with debts, ruined fields, and the bitter taste of betrayal. The world had once again taken what it wanted from the Andes, and once again, it left behind a promise broken by greed. When the boom faded, silence returned to the Altiplano. But it wasn't the sacred silence of dawn, when wind and prayer meet before the first light. It was the silence of exhaustion. The soil lay bare. Fields once vibrant with a dozen varieties of quinoa now stretched monotonous and gray. One seed, one color, one destiny. The llamas were gone. The ancient rotation cycles, the harmony between crops and herds, between feast and fallow, had been broken.
Nos ha empezado un poco a rotar el tiempo de cosecha, ¿no? El tiempo de siembra ya no es en el mismo tiempo, ¿no? Y se pone a secar al sol. Como está lloviendo ahorita, el grano está húmedo. Y cuando está húmedo, si lo colocamos, tiende a honguearse.
And without the llamas came hunger. Their dung had nourished the soil for centuries. Their absence left it sterile. Farmers tried to buy fertilizer, but the prices rose faster than their earnings. So they left. Whole families packed their lives into pickup trucks and migrated to El Alto, La Paz, Puno, chasing work that never came. In the cities, they became ghosts. The children of Pachamama now selling bottled water at intersections, sweeping sidewalks, carrying bricks on construction sites. In their homes, quinoa disappeared from their plates. Imported noodles and canned sardines replaced the sacred grain. A bowl of quinoa became a luxury, something reserved for holidays or for tourists who came searching for authenticity. And the elders, those who remembered the prayers and rituals, watched in disbelief. They had dreamed that the world's attention would bring dignity. Instead, it brought emptiness, a hollow prosperity that vanished as quickly as it came. Some villages tried to fight back. They rebuilt their cooperatives, reintroduced llamas, replanted lost varieties, the rainbow grains that once painted the fields. They spoke again to the mountains, even as they signed export contracts, trying to balance faith and necessity. It was not easy. You cannot simply summon back what the market devours. But they tried, because resilience runs in their blood. And amidst the fatigue, something began to shift. The younger generation, those raised between city asphalt and mountain wind, started asking questions. Why did the world suddenly care about our food, but not our lives? Why did health for them mean hunger for us? The answers weren't in the universities or ministries. They were buried in the soil, waiting for someone to listen again. Quinoa was never meant to be a global brand. It was meant to be a covenant, a reminder that nourishment is not a transaction, but a relationship between human and land, between spirit and sustenance. And perhaps in the ruins of the boom, that memory is what will survive. The world moved on, as it always does. The wellness industry found new idols. Chia, acai, spirulina, and quinoa quietly slipped from the headlines. But in the Andes, the dust had not settled. The scars were still fresh, on the land, on the people, on the faith that bound them together. And yet, in that silence, something began to germinate. In the cracked soil of forgotten villages, women gathered again to trade seeds. Tiny, multicolored pearls passed hand to hand as if they were returning lost children home. They spoke not of markets, but of memories, of flavors long vanished, of rituals that had been buried under profit. A few cooperatives refused to let the old ways die. They began restoring the diversity that had been erased. Red quinoa, black quinoa, speckled quinoa, each one with a story, a name, a prayer. They formed alliances across the mountains, rebuilding what the global market had fractured. In Peru, groups like Cupin started teaching young farmers how to rotate crops again, to bring back the llamas, to feed the earth before feeding the world. In Bolivia, ANAPQUI pushed for fair prices and local consumption so that quinoa could return to Andean tables instead of supermarket shelves in London. Meanwhile, far away in the West, something else was shifting. A new generation of eaters began to question the promises printed on their packaging. They saw through the illusion of ethical consumption, realizing that health cannot be built on the hunger of others. And slowly, the myth unraveled. The lie that we could cleanse ourselves through consumption, that salvation could be bought one bowl at a time, began to collapse under its own hypocrisy. Because the truth is simple. No food is pure when it's grown in injustice. No wellness is real if it comes at someone else's expense. The people of the Andes never asked to save the world. They only asked to be allowed to live in balance with it. Now, as the winds return across the Altiplano and the first green shoots of quinoa pierce the soil again, there's a lesson rising with them, ancient and urgent. What we call superfoods are not miracles. They are memories, and memories demand respect. If we could taste that truth, really taste it, perhaps the next time we lift a fork, we'd remember who planted the seed.
Nuestros ancestros producían orgánicamente siempre nuestra quinoa, más en el sur altiplano que estamos ahorita. Y nosotros manejamos ese es lo que nos enseñó nuestros abuelos, nuestros ancestros, ¿ya? Uno es por el tema de la alimentación, nuestra quinoa tiene que ser incomparable que las otras quinoas que existen en Bolivia y en otros países a nivel mundial, ¿no? Entonces tenemos que identificarnos como quinoa orgánica, ¿no? Porque la quinoa orgánica está en el sur, como ves, estamos en las orillas del salar. Aquí está la quinoa real orgánica, lo que se produce realmente. Si metemos químico, te da un buen resultado, pero le va matando el suelo también, ¿no? Entonces, yo lo voy a gozar del suelo, pero para mis hijos ya no va a tener esa fertilidad, la tierra ya va a estar muerta, ¿no? Entonces, nosotros la cuidamos, nuestra Pachamama.
At dawn, the Altiplano breathes again. The wind moves through the empty terraces, whispering the same word it has carried for thousands of years, vida, life. Somewhere, a woman bends to the soil. Her fingers break the crust of the earth and find what her grandmother left behind, a single seed, pale as bone, patient as time. She presses it into the ground, covers it with dust, and murmurs a prayer older than empire, older than money, older than the idea that health could ever be bought. The markets rise and fall, the trends come and go, but the seed stays. It waits for rain, for care, for the sound of gratitude. Maybe the world doesn't need another superfood. Maybe what it needs is to remember where food begins. Not in the factories, not in the algorithms of nutrition, but in the trembling hands that still believe the earth is alive. So the next time we eat, let it be a small act of reverence. Let it taste like humility, like memory, like the soil that raised us. Because what we consume is never just food. It is the story of how we choose to live and how much we're willing to forget.